The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
You're listening to
Wrestling to the Max.
Alert. Clear all channels.
This is an exclusive.
How you like that?
And your hosts, Gary Vaughn, Sean Garmer, and Paul Leazar.
Hello and welcome to the Wrestling to the Max WWE 205 Live review for December 13, 2016. I'm your host, Sean Garmer, and with me here, Mr. Paul Leazar.
Hey yo.
We'll probably have a actual 205 Live intro next week. Just I didn't have time to get Gary to do this for me, and weird that I have not heard from Gary all day. We were supposed to do the football podcast after this, but I guess he got busy or something. It is that holiday season, so usually around this time Gary is like going to the mall various times or whatever to find Christmas gifts and whatnot. So, but we are here to do this thing, of course, talking about that hour show, and this was taped before Raw. This was not live. They left the name the same. How did you feel? I felt like the crowd reactions were a bit muted. Not in that you didn't hear, in more that like you almost didn't hear them. Not in so much that they weren't there, but it almost felt like they, on purpose, kind of killed the crowd a bit because they knew it wasn't live.
I didn't think they were necessarily quiet. It felt like the same sort of crowd we'd had before for all the 205 shows. And I only wonder if they taped it just simply because of all the other stuff they have going on this week. It's WWE Week on USA. They have tribute to the troops. And maybe this was just the only way they felt like they could get it on there or whatever. But I thought it was a very odd move, to say the least.
Well, we didn't get to talk about this with you because you were gone on your vacation. But one of the news items that came out last week was the idea that in 2017, because they might make the decision to take NXT live in order to help network drive things to the network more, and then bring 205 live and tape it and have that air live after NXT, so you have like a 2-hour block on Wednesdays instead of having that kind of cumbersome thing where 205 live comes before Talking Smack, so you don't really get to end your stuff for SmackDown. You have to watch this other show first, and then you kind of get the capper to SmackDown after that. How would you feel about them sort of being in, obviously the crowd would do better for them, but how do you feel about kind of taking them out of the aspect of, hey, you're in front of the big crowds, you got to figure it out?
I wonder where the idea comes in for this. I know I have to think that the thinking behind this is that NXT and the Cruiserweight division sort of draw the same crowd to them, the smarter crowd, the guys like us, people who watch the shows, hang out on the internet, talk about wrestling, watch a whole bunch of other types of wrestling, all that stuff. And if they're going around to these smaller venues with these guys, maybe they're just going to think the crowd reaction is going to be better, and hopefully from there they can grow it like sort of NXT has grown out of Full Sail into these other buildings for the big takeover specials and all this other stuff, right?
Right.
But it feels like, 205 Live hasn't exactly been what I would call a success. And the episode we're going to talk about tonight, I think, might be the best episode they've done so far. But I don't know. Like, I'm still wondering if the idea of 205 Live in the Cruiserweight division is even going to make it to 2017, Like, it doesn't feel like they have a whole lot of support behind it.
No, it doesn't, but I think the best thing you're going to get is taking them over to Full Sail. And I mean, like I think I said this during, I would hate it for guys like Metalik and Tozawa that were probably promised, hey, even though you're going to be on this show, you're still going to be in front of the big WWE crowds, and you're still going to get to experience what that's like, and perhaps they take you and move you into something else, after that. Whereas I think once you hit Full Sail, that reality sort of sets in of, is this all we're ever going to be able to do? Are we ever going to get back on the main roster again? And I would hate that for those guys that signed having bigger aspirations, and this is kind of all you get to do. So in a way, I don't want it to regress and go back there. I think the show would be better because of the crowds it would be in front of, and it would be hitting that target audience only. And then you could have the special parts on Raw or whatever, but I don't know. I'm sort of with you in that you don't know if the Cruiserweights are going to last that long anyway. But I almost don't, because I feel like once you decide to press that button, you're admitting failure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And do you want to hit that button and say, okay, well, we did all we could, let's just put it over here and have it exist now?
I would still think they would show up on Raw and all that, and obviously it's not going to be the same group of guys every week showing up on Raw or anything like that, and I would think they would still get spots on pay-per-view too, but when you scale 205 Live back, and maybe it's even that might just be an experiment to see if they can actually fly on their own, maybe moving it to Full Sail would be better simply because you have a much more hands-off approach as far as how many people are going to be booking the show and looking at it and telling you what to do out in the ring. And maybe that's what you have to do to make them feel different, is to leave them the hands-off approach. And then when they show up on the pay-per-view, you got to make sure that transition's over. When they show up on Raw, you got to make sure that transition's over.
Well, and if you're going to do NXT Live, perhaps maybe you can have some of those guys show up on there as well. To kind of help that. I mean, do you think that that's, obviously with both Raw and SmackDown now being live, having that live element for NXT, I think on a weekly basis actually wouldn't be a bad thing, because you sort of have to adjust to how that is. Whereas, being taped and being live is a totally different aspect. And yes, you get it for the takeovers, but you're doing this every week on Raw and SmackDown. Wouldn't it sort of be important for that aspect to also be on NXT then as well? And I'm going to guess it would help the show feel more important if you're doing it every week live instead of taping a bunch of things all in one set.
I don't know if that's still going to help them transition and find NXT in a larger audience of it just simply being live. But I do agree with you that it simply would be better for the wrestlers who are performing on it live each and every week, and you get a much fuller experience of what being up on the main roster is like, as far as what you have to do presentation-wise and everything else, and handling live microphones that are actually live instead of you maybe having a retake or something like that.
I will say SmackDown has a much different feel to it being live than being taped. So perhaps you do get that different feeling with NXT each week, just because you do have a fresh crowd, even if it's the same people. You don't get that, like, oh, we're definitely at about the third show on NXT this go around because the crowd's dead. So I mean, it does help in that aspect, and sometimes that's important because sometimes these matches, when you get to that third or fourth one, and they'll have big matches sometimes too, and it's like, what the hell? Where's the crowd?
Right.
And it's such a vital part of the NXT experience as well of watching. I mean, whether it's positive or negative, because obviously, not everybody's a big fan of the NXT crowd. But that's neither here nor there right now. Let's talk about what happened on this show. They have more Jack Gallagher coming out first. This is also where it's weird. is that this was taped before Raw, so they're showing you stuff from Raw, even though this was before. And you have Jack Gallagher finally get to wrestle somebody that's not Arya Daivari, for God's sakes. And Drew Gulak, who he's actually from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where they were in for Raw. So he got a nice little pop there. And I thought these two worked well together. They were just whooping each other for a while. And Jack Gallagher wins to continue his little push. And I like the fact that he's getting something out of this. He's really starting to... I think he's starting to get somewhere with the audience. And he definitely stands out.
There's a part of me that really wishes this was the feud going forward, because not only do Gallagher and Gulak have that sort of same ground first rule as far as their movesets and how they approach wrestling and all that, but they're very different on the scale. Gallagher's a bit playful and an all around a true gentleman, and Gulak is this over a top aggressive ground, almost Street Fighter type of character, and I think that would be really fun to play off of more than what you have going on with Daivari, who seemingly, I don't want to sail the boat on him yet, but hasn't made the greatest first impression as some of these other guys have.
No, he hasn't. I mean, he's not the he's not a bastion of excitement either.
Mm-hmm.
He's rather bland. So when you have a guy like Drew Gulak who's experienced, he knows what he's doing in there, and he knows the style he needs to hit with Jack Gallagher, I think it's much more fluid, much better. And now that Gulak is actually signed with WWE, perhaps maybe they'll do something with him now. So that he does become a feud for him or for somebody in the future. I think going from here is sort of you have the introduction of Mustafa Ali, or a kind of reintroduction for him. They had like a video package for him last week, and then this week they sort of have him say similar things that he already said in that video package, but more in sort of a sit-down setting, which I thought was good for him. And then he has this match with Lince Dorado, which was actually good. I enjoyed this. These two went out there. I mean, whoever does a head scissors off the apron like Lince Dorado did in this match, this was just fun for the 4 minutes or so they got out there.
This, I feel like, is sort of what you need out of the Cruiserweights, and maybe not in every match, obviously, because I think the point of the Cruiserweights is to show that they can do different styles no matter what, and really can present you something different than what you get in the typical WWE style. And I don't think that's exactly been hit upon in the main roster, but this match certainly did. Lince and Mustafa Ali got to do the big flippies everybody's wanted to see. They got, the big, Lince had the moonsault to the apron, and then of course the big tope, or the Acai moonsault that Lince just, banged the back of his head on the ramp.
Stunner even.
Yeah, which was great. And Mustafa Ali, I think, is a wonderful wrestler too. I got the privilege to see him live earlier this month for when Wrestle Circus came to Dallas, and he was great. So I'm really pulling for that guy to do well here too, and I got no problem seeing this match again, especially if it's going to get more time.
I like the double count too, because Dorado's sort of been a guy that jobs a lot, and you kind of need that sometimes where you don't. You obviously didn't want Mustafa Ali to sort of to lose on his, I guess, debut on the show, and you don't need Dorado just continuing to be seen as one of these guys that, okay, when he comes out, you're going to get a match, but he's going to lose, and you don't want that out of these guys that you're all trying to establish at the same time.
And they're still trying to find that strong heel to step up in the division, and it's not to take away from what Brian Kendrick has done, but he doesn't feel like that top heel, in the division yet. They need somebody else to try to find that spot, and I think this might be a good way to do it and see what you can get out of Mustafa Ali.
And I mean, I hate them having used the stereotype thing for him, but the fact that he wants to show people that he's more than that, I guess is better than just having him be like Daivari, where that's what he is.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, he's got the familial thing that WWE wants to play off of, and that's what he did on the indie circuit too. So I'm sure it's what he's most comfortable with playing.
It's fair enough. How do you feel about I know we sort of talked about this with Raw, but so you got Noam Dar kind of hitting on Alicia Fox. Alicia Fox is saying, hey, Cedric's my man. I don't want anything to do with you, sort of thing. Is it one of these cases where you're kind of glad Alicia Fox is at least doing something? Or kind of like what we talked about on Raw, this seems sort of petty and not what you need the women to be doing?
It's not like Alicia is ever going to set the world on fire as a wrestler, right? I mean, she can do what she can in the ring, but when you look at the girls they're bringing in now for the women's division, she's outclassed by a mile,
Right.
I don't have a problem with them working this in on 205 Live because it adds a different aspect to feuds that you have going on already, where you have, you have Gallagher and Davari sort of doing their thing, where it's sort of based around injuries and hurting each other. You have the battle at the top between TJP and Kendrick and now Rich Swann. And then you got this going on over here. And I think Cedric Alexander, they want him to be a big part of this show. And, pairing up Noam Dar with Alicia Fox and trying to find something to keep making sure these guys stay different and fresh. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, this is a thing that's been, I don't know why I'm complaining about it. This has been a thing that's been in wrestling for many years. Men fighting over the women. It's not, it's something that happens in real life even. And it's not like, it's something that I guess many people can relate to. It's just, you got to make sure you don't do it in a hokey way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you don't want it to turn into John Cena and Zack Ryder or various other ones where you clearly have this one guy that looks way more like he matters than the other guy. You have to do it where, Noam Dar doesn't look secondary to Cedric Alexander in this. Like, he's just some punk that, he messed with Alicia Fox and then, you don't want him to look like Enzo. Okay?
Right.
So, you got to be careful with this, but I guess it's fine because it sort of gives a character trait to Noam Dar that he's cocky, he's into himself, and, at some point we're going to get Cedric Alexander probably confronting him about this, and there's a storyline there, and it's better than just, two guys are wrestling again.
Right. And I think the reason why we dumped on it showing on Raw is that it felt petty there. This felt like growth, at least as far as trying to get to figure out who Noam Dar is. So that is what I think I appreciated more out of this than their previous attempt on Raw.
I think with the women it's different because they have established on both brands that the women are beyond this now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the women should be taken seriously as competitors. The feuds that we're going to have are wrestling related, not catty stuff related. And this is sort of stuff that should be on Total Divas, not on Raw. And so I think that's where it kind of leaves that sour taste in your mouth. Like, okay, we kind of already got to deal with whatever Emelina is supposed to be, which that thing that we talked about on the show last week was apparently fake. Or not last week, yesterday. So Emma is fine. But I don't, it's more of the, okay, we don't want more of what we're getting from Emma and stuff like that, storylines going on. We want more of what we're getting from Becky and Alexa Bliss and Sasha and Charlotte, with the women.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And speaking of athletic competition, you do get a main event here that goes almost 10 minutes between TJP and Rich Swann, where they're basically wanting to show who's better than the other. TJP does win here after he lost on Raw and made Rich Swann even tap out. This is so weird. This is where I have a problem with these kind of things. I get that you are trying to prove that both TJP and Brian Kendrick deserve to have their shot at Rich Swann, even though both of these guys have rematch clauses, and you don't really need that. Like, both of these guys have been championed for, in Kendrick and BJP. You don't need them to have these matches where they have to prove, oh, I deserve my shot. Not in this situation, anyway. So, like, having TJP lose on Raw and then having TJP win on 205 Live is sort of like, I don't know what you gain from this other than, okay, your champion just lost before he's about to wrestle on Sunday for the title. How does that help him?
This felt like a double-edged sword to me, because at the same time, while I wasn't a giant fan of TJP winning clean, at least I had a clean finish, because I was expecting Brian Kendrick to run in and sort of set up the match that way. And on the other side, they worked a knee injury here with Swann too, of TJP really focusing on that, and it stopped Swann of doing the 450, and he locks in the knee bar and wins that way. So at that same thing, I feel like they're trying to maybe build up a small injury thing here where Swann's having knee problems going to the pay-per-view, and then you have all the stuff swirling around TJP and Kendrick and Swann, and then the sort of whatever friendship thing you have going on between TJP and Swann, which doesn't feel altogether real. Right. But you have TJP also on the verge of turning heel too, so I was kind of left feeling conflicted, but I was okay with the match. Like, I thought the match was good. I put it right up there with the Cruiserweight title match we had between Swann and Kendrick at the first episode of 405. So,
yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's in that category. This was a really good match, and I do like the fact that they're adding that in, because if Swann wins, then he's overcoming odds, and that's kind of what you want him to do as your big babyface champion. So,
right.
You know, I mean, and you have another guy that you're sort of establishing in that role in Jack Gallagher. So if you did want to turn TJP, you already have another guy set to already be on the other side. So,
and just watching these promos too, TJP feels like so much more of a natural heel.
Yeah, he's such a dick. Like, it's just, I'm so into myself, and I think I'm better. I think I should be leading this generation. Like, hey, if you're that's that whole confidence, arrogance, like, line, and having it turn into arrogance for him wouldn't be too far of a stretch, and I think it works, you know,
right,
in that way. I had something I was going to transition to here, and I completely forgot now, as far as something we were going to end the show on talking about, but oh well. I don't know why I couldn't think of it right then. But so, like, we haven't seen. There's they did show another little vignette for somebody that's coming, in Tajiri. Yep. So now we know Tajiri, Tozawa, and Metalik are all on their way whenever they're going to show up. You know, I like this whole, hey, letting you know there's more people coming, and you should be excited about it, and this is somebody you know. So, and there was recently something stated that WWE is not going to go, when they do these tryouts now, it's women and cruiserweights. That's what they're looking for. Does that encourage you now that we're definitely, whether 205 Live is on the brink or whatever, they're definitely looking for more people to put in that division?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like they're at least willing to give this a real shot, and maybe longer than the short time frame I was obviously giving it, but it feels like they're committed at least to the direction they're going right now, which is great, because at the same time, I'm sure 205 Live does keep providing content for the network, and if you're looking for people that need original content on what they're paying for, it certainly does add to that. The Women's Classic, of course, I'm sure is going to be a huge deal for the network next year. I'm really looking forward to it, and it's great to see that they're looking forward to padding out that roster, and maybe someday we get a female exclusive show on the network, you know? I mean, you never know.
hey, Ring of Honor doesn't do the greatest of. They don't do them greatest of favors when they have these, but the Women of Honor shows do kind of come off as special. Like just the fact that it's an all-woman show,
Mhm.
you know. So maybe perhaps they will do that because I mean, if you're really not going to add these indie shows to the network, I mean, what does it really hurt your? I mean, you'd obviously have to find somewhere to tape it, and that might be something that you might have to go do at Full Sail just because I think you can't tape all these shows during a Raw and a SmackDown and all that stuff. You know, you don't want to give those guys, that production crew and all them more work than they already have to deal with. But I don't think it would be a bad thing to have them have their own show as well. And I mean, I don't think you need to take any of the ones that are on the main roster and kind of put them down, but certainly if you're going to have a lot more women signing, and between the NXT division and what you get with the new ones out of the Women's Classic, I mean, definitely you could have something going there.
Mhm.
Now I remember what I was going to ask. So Austin Aries is on commentary. I don't know that we've talked. We might have talked about this, or you and Gary might have, but Austin Aries has hinted at several times that whenever he is back from injury, that he's going to go after whoever is Cruiserweight champion. Do you like Austin Aries being involved on this show? Do you wish that? Do you think that this means that sort of him having a big role in NXT is sort of finished? Or do you think that this is kind of just something for him to make the 205 live show a little bit more interesting, adding a bit of star power there, and that it has nothing to do with whatever he does on NXT?
There's a couple of warning lights I have for him doing this. Obviously, there's nothing saying that him joining the Cruiserweights means that he won't be doing NXT still, because we've seen the Cruiserweights go back and do NXT work. And maybe the Dusty Classic was only meant to feel special for that aspect, but it certainly left the door open for you being able to work both. And it won't be the first time either that people have been on the main roster and still working in NXT at the same time. That being said, pigeonholing is a thing that that WWE has done before in the past with the Cruiserweight division, and it would certainly suck for Austin Aries to get stuck in that role, especially whenever he fought so hard in TNA once to be taken out of the X division to be treated like a heavyweight. So and he's facing a much larger mountain and trying to get to convince people that he deserves to be treated like a heavyweight after going from Cruiserweight, all that stuff. But that being said, he does bring a lot to the table as far as that. He's another veteran. He's another guy who has a lot of star power behind him, and certainly will make people, or hopefully will make people, want to watch the Cruiserweights. And he's a complete package too, which you can't say that for so many of the guys in that division right now. So there's certainly that to add to that as well. And I mean, we keep talking about top heel. Look no further than Austin Aries.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think he gives Brian Kendrick a run for his money, and maybe even takes it. As far as your top heel, I think there is nobody more smug and more like just into himself to where you don't want to like him, and then Austin Aries. And I think he works so well in that spot. But I know we've talked about this a bunch of times, but if you're gonna do something like this with Austin Aries, why don't you let Neville be down there and do this?
That's a great question. We've seen Kalisto in the role too. He'd be great down here. I mean, guys that you've already established in this role would be great. I don't know what their plans are for Neville, because we haven't seen him in forever. I don't know what they're doing with the same, he's on that same milk cart next to Apollo Crews as far as, have you seen this guy?
But that's the thing. Like Apollo Crews, is obviously heavyweight. He can't be in that sort of situation. But like Neville, you could easily remedy that by, hey, let's add another guy that's been on the main roster, and he can still be on the main roster. He is a Raw wrestler. Like, what's the big deal here? I don't see where, unless he's got another injury that we don't know about. It seems like you're wasting an opportunity here with him.
I mean, they could be reworking his gimmick too, like we thought they might be doing for Apollo too. So I don't want to say it's too soon to tell, but I don't. It would seem a shame to waste Neville on just sitting there. The guy's too talented to not be doing a whole bunch of nothing.
Certainly. So that's going to do it here for the 205 Live show. Hope you enjoyed it, and you can let us know whether it's by giving us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you listen to this show, Google Play, YouTube. Leave a comment in there. You can go to WTMnet.com, and whether you're listening to it on there or you're just browsing the rest of the website, that would also be a help to us. Of course, you can go join our Wrestling to the Max Facebook group, where you can talk about all of our shows and just talk about wrestling with all the great people in there. To be honest, if you have recently started listening to our shows, you go to that Facebook group. It's not a bunch of maybe not always so helpful to us, because sometimes we ask for feedback on things, and we have to remember that 95% of the people that are in there are just in there to be wrestling fans all talking to each other and not necessarily listeners of the podcast. So it's that double-edged sword for us, but for you guys, you can go feel free to converse with people about all kinds of wrestling in there. Various times it's about wrestling we don't even cover on this show. So, which, look, if we, like Paul and I discussed at the beginning of, I think it was the SmackDown Live review, if we had just infinite hours in the day to have millions of W2Ms talking about different kinds of wrestling, we would, but unfortunately we don't, So only so many things can be on these shows. But all right, we'll see you next week. Until then, later, everyone.
Take it easy, guys.
The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.